Hello. Today we're going to make chocolate chip cookies. These cookies are made without needing a mixer and come out tall, round, and crunchy. They differ from traditional chocolate chip cookies, which are usually soft or at least tender, and often much flatter. Before we start measuring our ingredients, now would be a good time to preheat your oven. In fact, mine's been preheating for about an hour now. You want to preheat it to 375 degrees. Before you do, check to make sure you don't have anything in the oven. That can be a disaster. And put your oven on the second highest. The only thing that should probably be in your oven right now is an oven thermometer. It'll help you get the right temperature. For instance, I have to set my oven to 360 degrees to get 375 for these cookies. Now, we're making these cookies with very simple ingredients, 8 total. Now, I've cheated and measured them ahead of time to save you time from watching me. I'd still recommend you measure everything out before you get along with the mixing. It's much less stressful. So for our dry team, we have 300 grams of flour, a teaspoon of baking powder, a teaspoon of salt. We measure the flour by weight to help us make a consistent cookie. If you don't have a scale, you can make do with measuring 2 1/4 cups. For the wet team, we have 2 sticks of butter, which we will melt in a moment. My microwave likes about 1:20. Be careful not to go too long or it'll splatter. We also have 2 egg yolks. Eggs are easiest to separate with your hands. Just open the egg up in the bowl, reach in with your fingers, and scoop the egg out. If it feels icky, just wash your hands afterwards. Additionally, we have sugar for our wet team. While sugar may look like it belongs on the dry team, it is in fact on the wet team. This is because sugar mixes with water so easily, it'd be a shame not to do it now. Because our biggest goal here today, besides eating cookies, is to not overmix this batter. So adding sugar to the liquid now lets us get one more thing out of the way before we introduce the dry to the wet. So we have 150 grams of white sugar and 142 grams of brown. You can more easily get away with cups here, 3/4 each. I find that I end up with slightly more than the gram amount when I do though. The final ingredient, the chocolate in the chocolate chip cookies, 12 ounces by weight, or 2 cups if you still haven't bought a scale. Come on, it's been what, 2 minutes already? Mixing the dry. Now the dry is simple, you just dump it all together. Voila. However, it's best if we mix it well and if it's sifted. That is, if we incorporate air. Sifters are a pain, so I'm cheating and using this food processor. Excuse me. There we go. That's plenty. Now, you can skip this step. It's not the most important one. What's that? Oh yes, it's not over mixing. That's the most important one. Yeah. Now, on to the wet. This is pretty easy. In fact, in this recipe, it's pretty hard to mess up. Why? Because there's hardly any water to be found. Instead, we have all this butter and a couple of egg yolks. And egg yolks love to mix with butter. So, this is just a habit of mine. I like to mix up my egg yolks first. It kind of wakes them up. Feel free to dump yours straight into the hot butter if you're a sadist. Now we'll just wait for this butter. Ah, here we go. Nice melted butter. Add the eggs. And on to the sugar. Just dump it in. Ah, here it is. Now normally, I'd say that we were dissolving the sugar into the water. But in this recipe that has so little water, it's more like you're wetting a big glob of sugar. As you can see here. It's pretty thick stuff. Take a bit of, mix it together. There's just so much sugar. What you're going to end up with is going to look a lot like caramel you put in the oven for too long. There. Alright. So we have all that mixed up. Now we come to the most important step. We're about to not overmix. How do we do that? Well, first we want to use a nice big spatula to mix this well. Don't have one? Use a big spoon. Second, we want to make a place for our liquid to sit. Dig a little well down in your dry goods like this. Now we're going to put the wet stuff on the dry stuff and not overmix. Something like this. There we go. This means what we want to do is scoop this proto batter around for as little time as possible for the dry goods to slurp up the wet. I'll say this twice. Doesn't have to be smooth, and it shouldn't be smooth. It doesn't have to be smooth, and it shouldn't be smooth. Well, it looks like maybe I know the third time. It doesn't have to be smooth, and it shouldn't be smooth. And maybe a half. Alright, we're done. See? That's it. Now we'll add the chips. Don't cheat. We don't need to overmix them. Not now, I'm recording for YouTube. There. Double done. Now to the oven. We're here at the oven. Now, if the most important thing is not overmixing, then the third most important thing is your oven temperature. Now, ours is holding at 375 quite nicely. Thanks to our oven thermometer, I know. Now, what's the second most important thing? Well, it's measuring. Both measuring we just did, but probably more so the measuring we're about to do. We want these cookies to be portioned, that is, measured, onto this sheet of parchment paper as evenly as we can. If we don't, the smaller cookies will cook faster than the larger ones, right? And we don't want to eat tiny burnt cookies. So I use this disher, a number 20, for making the cookies. It's the number one tool you can't live without. Scooping cookies, in fact, is probably the most laborious and time-consuming thing about making cookies. Well, besides maybe listening to someone talk about making cookies. So you want it to go by as quickly as possible. I'm only going to show you scooping one or two of these things. If you really want to save some time, get yourself a plate and you can put pre-scooped cookies on here after you've done your first batch, like so. Then you'll have them all ready for when you're done with the first batch. And you won't have to waste time scooping them for the second, third, etc. Amazing! Through the magic of editing, we're all done. Now I'll put these in the oven for about 15 minutes, but really until they're golden brown. See you then. Oh, these look delicious, and they smell great too. Now, there's really only one thing left before you can eat these, and that's cooling them. My advice here, and yes, there's advice even here, notice a trend. My advice here is to let them cool in the sheet pan for 2 minutes. This will give the cookies time to kind of gel up. It's kind of like a cool down from an aerobic exercise. Skip this step, and besides burnt mouths, you'll also have broken pieces of cookie lying every which way. So after 2 minutes have passed, put them on a cooling rack. I have 3, which is just how many I need for this recipe, which makes about 3 dozen. So after that's done, wash, rinse, repeat. Thanks for watching. I hope this no-mix chocolate chip cookie recipe is as easy for you to do in your own home. I think these things are great. I hope yours turn out just as good. Bon appetit!